Thanks so much, Kevin, and welcome everyone to this first session of this month's PhocusWire Pulse event. Our topic for this session is digital marketing in hospitality, and I am joined by Victoria Murden, Global Marketing Director for the Red Carnation Hotel Collection. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Red Carnation is based in London, has about 20 properties around the world, primarily in the UK, Ireland, and Africa. Do I have that correct?
You do, yeah, that's correct.
So can you begin by giving us a sense of your process that you go through? And I imagine you're in the process of going through as we're talking to develop your marketing strategy.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in normal times, and for a marketing for a hotel brand such as ours, sort of online reputation and guest feedback is incredibly vital for us. But obviously, over the past year and a half, that strategy's changed completely. The guests haven't been there, so we've had to sort of pivot, and I know that word's been used incredibly on a lot of occasions over the past few months, but we've had to become even more sort of insight driven and listening to what our guests are telling us online and in the digital space, because they haven't been in the hotels. So it's been a case of, using as many listening tools as we can, really sort of pivoting to use our own channels such as social media, our websites, and all of those digital channels that are ours and owned, to listen to what our guests are telling us that they want, really, to drive that strategy for the next few months.
And when you talk about using social media, then I'm curious, are you actively soliciting feedback and input in that way, or is it truly more of a listening?
So it's more of an organic process, I would say. But interestingly, over the past few months, those channels people have become more and more engaged in, I think, because they've really missed the attention and interaction and engagement with our hotel teams, who I guess are really kind of actually the marketeers for us in normal times. So they're desperate actually to engage with the teams in our hotels, to hear from them in some way. So for us, we've done that via social media really, and other channels, to reach out and say, hey, the teams are still here. They really miss our guests. Is there anything that you're looking forward to in the coming months when you can revisit us again? How can we help you? What experiences do you really want when you come back to us? And that's really helped us to develop what we'll be doing over the next few months and years.
Yeah. And so can you then talk to us about, how has your strategy been affected based on what's happened in the last year as you start to look ahead, whether that's related to the types of messages you're putting out or the types of channels you're using?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, we've really tried to not be too reactive actually, and try to look further out to the future. So I know a lot of brands, for obvious reasons, have had to almost turn off messaging in some ways, and teams have been furloughed across the world. We've wanted to take a bit of a longer term strategy and invest at this time, which I know a lot of brands aren't in a position to do. But for example, we've relaunched all of our websites over the last, during the pandemic, really. We've taken the opportunity to redesign, redevelop, relaunch 20 websites in that time, which we really feel very fortunate to have been in a position to do. But it's meant that the team are now really engaged in looking to the future, looking at the messaging that we'll be putting out across those new websites. For example, I think sustainability for us is huge. Well-being, guests really want to come and feel like they're being cared for and their health is being looked after and they're having a holistic experience at the hotels.
So that speaks to some of your messaging and content then. Can we talk a bit about the channels that you're using? And, also for other types of marketing? For example, I know, Google has made some updates in the last year related to its platform. Certainly April 2020, they launched the pay per stay for hotel ads partners to remove that risk of cancellation. And then in March of this year, they introduced the free booking links. Any of that playing into your strategy?
Absolutely. And to be honest, we're now really considering Google to be another channel in its own right. So, even when we're talking about just social media, we're almost thinking of Google as its own channel, really. So when we're looking to make updates across Instagram, Facebook, we're also thinking we need to make sure that our Google profiles and Google My Business profiles are up to date and relevant and content rich. So every month, as a strategy, we're making sure that all of those profiles are kept up to date. Because, as I said, it really now is its own channel in its own right. And then also, similarly, our own channels, as I said before, social, and then for us, email marketing. We have a very engaged database for each of the hotels and for Red Carnation. And we've focused a lot of our efforts recently on trying to build those databases, keep guests informed and engaged through those databases that we have, and grow them. And then also, I think SMS messaging and marketing is probably going to be a focus for us in the coming months. It seems possibly like you're going backwards, but I think actually it's a channel that people are increasingly looking and thinking, okay, yes, there are opportunities here actually to reach out to guests in a very quick and easy way, and to get the message across that we need to get across.
Yeah. And everybody's got their phone in their pocket, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think even more so over the last few months, it's almost become an extension of yourself, really.
Yeah. So, and when you talk about some of these strategies and plans, is it differentiated for each of the 20 properties?
It is, to an extent. So I head up a global team of marketing specialists, really, which I think is probably different to some other hotel brands, in the sense that we don't have a marketing person in each hotel who's more of a generalist, I guess. We have a global team, so the messaging is then the same, it's consistent. Obviously, within that, there are differences. So we opened a safari lodge in Botswana at the end of last year, and we're looking to open a hotel in Edinburgh next year. So obviously, the requirements for those two hotels are very different. So there will be specifics within the strategy that obviously have to pertain to each hotel. But generally, we have a consistent strategy across all, so that, our brand values are really clear to our guests. Being a family-owned business, that's very important for us.
Let's talk a bit about the OTAs and the dynamic there. And I'm wondering, I know I had done a story with the folks from D-Edge Hospitality Solutions a few months ago with some research they had done that found that there's actually been an increase in the share of bookings coming direct to hotel websites in the last year, whereas the share coming through the OTAs is down. Now, of course, there's lots of factors in there related to the lack of international travel and more domestic and all of that. But I'm just wondering what you are seeing in relation to the OTAs and how that might relate to your book direct strategies.
Absolutely. I mean, I would agree with that. For us, book direct, as it is, with every hotel brand, it is such an important strategy for us. We always support the OTAs, and we have very good partnerships and relationships with them. But absolutely, direct bookings are key. And for us, it's about sort of communicating that value. As you said, travel trends have changed over the last few months. I think people sometimes want the reassurance of booking direct, and what that can offer you, as opposed to perhaps booking with the OTAs, and communicating the messages for us. Early check-in, late check-out, total flexibility, whatever we can do for you when you're with us. I think that people do want the reassurance of going direct to the brand and really having that personal relationship, and making, for us, it's, making it clear throughout that whole booking journey, right up till they come and arrive with us. Here's what we can offer you when you come to the hotel. I think that's increasingly important, actually.
Did I hear you say, so are you seeing an increase in the direct? And can you just speak a bit more about anything that you're doing in particular to drive that?
Yeah, sure. So yes, we are. And for us, I think the messaging is key to that, to drive that really. It's, when you stay with us, what can you expect? And how can we get you excited about your stay before you arrive? What add-on experiences are there that you can add? Here's the team before you arrive. Here are the characters that you can expect to meet. So throughout the sort of pre-stay email journey, we're trying to build more and more excitement about your stay that you possibly wouldn't get through booking through an OTA. You've made your reservation, but then that's it, and then you arrive. And I think people want a lot more reassurance, particularly at the moment, that they're going to have a great stay. All of the COVID protocols are in place, but also those behind the scenes late checkout, all of that that we can do to make the stay really special for you.
Right. Can you talk a bit about the breakdown of your digital advertising versus traditional, like radio, print, TV, that sort of thing? We did a story on a recent report from Sojourn that most hoteliers are still spending less than half of their budgets on digital advertising, which seems a bit counterintuitive. But what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, we are much more on the digital side. We do very little print, and as you said, traditional sort of mediums. Much more on the digital side, and much more of what we can own ourselves. So, building up those databases that we have, building up our social channels, empowering the teams within the hotels to feel like, that they can make a change within those channels as well. So we have social media champions in each hotel who share that strategy with us.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you explain a bit, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as you are dealing with, your marketing campaigns, marketing issues? Is it around developing unique content? Is it around measuring the effectiveness, personalization? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, measuring effectiveness is always a challenge within marketing, I think. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of challenges at the moment that are very specific to now, but I think it's important for us to look ahead to when we eventually emerge from this time, and looking at a longer term strategy, and what that might look like. So yeah, I think effectiveness definitely, and then embracing the changes that happen within hospitality, and understanding actually what it is that the guests want, as opposed to, I think sometimes there's a expectation within marketing to sort of always be innovating and making changes for change's sake, and possibly some an expectation there to do that. But it's important for us to listen to what our guests actually want and what the digital experience needs to be. So I think, recently the way that guests have changed, the way they interact with the hotel teams has changed. Obviously, people are expecting to be able to do much more online, just quickly check in, use an app, perhaps use QR codes to access menus, etc. So when we're kind of looking at our digital roadmap, it's really important for us as a team sometimes to push back and say, what is it that the guest needs and wants, as opposed to what looks really great on a marketing strategy and what we can present to stakeholders in a few months' time.
Right. And I would imagine a lot, as you said, just really has to know with knowing your particular guest, because it sounds like maybe with the types of properties you're talking about, that higher level of personal touch might still be a critical piece for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the challenge is, because it's about continuing that level of service that guests expect at the hotels, and they expect from the moment somebody opens the door to them, and they enter the reception, they get that same level of service throughout their stay. So from a marketing perspective and from a digital perspective, we need to make sure that that experience entirely matches that, so that, you know, it's seamless throughout, and it's not a subpar experience before you arrive at the hotel.
Right.
And matching the two together is really important, and a challenge as you build out that roadmap.
So another thing that occurs to me as we're talking about what travelers really want, you know, certainly something that we have seen evolve in the last year is the increased interest in the private rental sector, the short-term rental sector, alternative accommodations. I don't know if this is applicable necessarily with your properties, but I'm curious if has that impacted your strategy at all? Is there anything that you've done to try to attract the traveler that might otherwise be looking at a short-term rental to say, hey, here's what we can offer?
Absolutely. And actually, we're quite fortunate to have some options within our offering that do allow that. So, for example, a couple of the hotels in London have private residences and apartments. Okay. So that is definitely something that we are looking at in our advertising. But I think for us, it's about how we differentiate ourselves within that market and what makes those experiences special compared to, as you said, maybe a rental or something like that. So where can we add value by, showcasing the experiences that we have in the hotels that you can enjoy, as well as having the privacy of your own long-term residence, for example. And then exclusive use and buyout as well at the moment is really a focus for us. So people kind of want to come to the hotels and perhaps know that they're the only people there. They exclusively hire the whole thing. And we're fortunate that the hotels are mostly boutique and they're smaller, and that is an option. And it's a really interesting prospect, actually, as we start to think about our messaging in 2022.
Yeah, that is interesting. As we're getting ready to wrap up here, just a final question. You know, as the world is continuing to open, but very unevenly, and, you know, starts and stops and all of that, I'm wondering, what does that do for your planning? And, you know, for example, are you having to think about reserving some of your budget so you can react quickly in the future as things open, or what is the impact there?
Yeah, so I mean, we've made the decision to really carry out the strategy that we put together at the end of last year. But so in terms of budgeting, that's relatively stayed the same. The messaging, though, has changed, and it continues to change every other week, really. So it's about being ready with that messaging and having the whole team ready to quickly implement change and communicate that across all of the channels. So sort of having an always on strategy, really, but changing the messaging as and when we need to. And I think we've done a strong job over the past few months of making sure that the team are really sort of focused. We're working with the sales team now really as one big commercial team with marketing, sales, reservations, to make sure that the strategy that we're putting together is driven across all of those touch points.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. Our time is up, but we really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much.